Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Silas Odongo, and my channel is Professor Silas Odongo's Knowledge Hub. Gentlemen and ladies, allow me today to talk to you about sustainable land resource use in a changing climate. Ladies and gentlemen, we have talked about climate change and how climate change impacts many things. Today, allow me to look at how it impacts land resources and what we can do about that. Gentlemen and ladies, we know that climate change impacts land resources in a number of ways. One of the ways is that it impacts on agricultural and land use sectors. It also impacts on soil and water resources that are connected with land. It also impacts on ecosystem and forest. How does this happen? We know very well that when it comes to agriculture and land use, we have known climate change to affect seasons. When it affects seasons, it definitely affects crops and everything else. It also reduces crop yields. So how does this happen? We have talked about this. It also facilitates the growth and spread of pests and diseases that we are talking about. And then it also impacts on water availability, water quality, and even water access. We've been able to mention this before. With regard to soil and water resources, we know that climate change will create even soil erosion. We also know that it will cause water evaporation. And sometimes water evaporation can even cause salinization. I think we have been able to mention this previously. So where we have all these things, we tend to have soil's capacity for sequestration to be incapacitated. We even have what we call reduced groundwater recharge. So we can have so many things that we attribute climate to, particularly with regard to soil and water resources. On ecosystem and forest, we've been able to mention quite a number of things. We've said that climate change will lead to heat and then drought. And where we have drought and heat, we normally have wildfires that we mentioned before. We have forests shrinking. When the forests shrink, it is because probably we have been able to lose soil cover. And when we lose soil cover, we lose forests, we lose trees, then we also lose biodiversity. And where there are no these ones, humans, animals, and even plant lives will suffer. So you can imagine how climate will affect agriculture, how it will affect soil and water, how it affects ecosystem and the forest that we are talking about. So do we just sit and wait all this happening? No. What we normally think is the most agreeable way is to change to sustainable land resource use. So what do we mean? We talk about sustainable land resources use. We look at how do we manage our land. And you know, land does not come alone. Land comes with quite a lot. We have soil there, we have water, plants, and animals. These ones are closely connected with the land. So if we are to use land and all the related resources in manners that will enable us to meet the human needs that we have, if we can meet those human needs, and we have them long term, so that even as we use these resources, land resources, we assure future generations that they will still function. They will still also rely on the same, and then they can function. We can preserve them. So when we look at sustainable land resource use, then we envisage a holistic process, an integration of economic, social, and environmental considerations, particularly on matters of land. We know that land resources, just like others, are finite and they are also limited. So we need to use them in ways that will protect them and preserve them, even for the future generations. That is why when we have unsustainable management or use of these resources of land, like if we can deplete them, if we can damage land, or if we can damage even soil and even water and even biodiversity, then we can have problems. So if you have such any method or any approach to using the land resource that is ensuring that water, soil, and biodiversity are used faster than they can naturally regenerate, then we call those unsustainable, and we cannot really use them if we care about stopping or controlling climate change. So we see people using unsustainable practices when they are using land resources or connected resources like water, biodiversity, and even soils. Like, look at a case where there is deforestation or removal of natural vegetation, for example. If we have an activity that leads to that, then you know that that is unsustainable. If we practice agriculture and livestock husbandry, where we do overgrazing, so we graze a number of livestock that is beyond the carrying capacity of that land. So what normally happens is they compact the land, they cause what we call erosion. Sometimes they will lead to desertification. Then those ones are unsustainable. So if you also use agricultural practices that involve intensive cultivation, where we have like monoculture, you rely on one crop, or you use insufficient irrigation system, or you do over irrigation, so that you don't even have very good way of controlling the water. Or if you use excessive chemical input on land, or if you really expand agriculture even onto marginal or fragile lands, then we say those are unsustainable. How about if you have urban sprawl, or even you initiate infrastructure development where you quickly convert even agricultural land or fertile land through urbanization or construction, when people are doing roads, so that we lead to the loss. This one will lead to loss of all this, then we can call that unsustainable. Look at even when we are mining, when we are using industrial activities, it will obviously lead to land degradation, or maybe we can have direct excavation, or waste disposal, or even contamination that are there. Those are a bit unsustainable. So if we were to use sustainable means, particularly with land, when we are aware of the impact of climate change, then we got to be controlled or be guided by certain key principles. So what are some of those principles that we must take into account when we are doing sustainable land resource management? We want to do balancing of the various needs. We know we have a number of needs. We have needs for agriculture, needs for forestry, needs for even urban development. We need to develop. We need to have economic growth. We need to have social well-being in a place. We also don't forget environmental health. So all these needs have to really be balanced, so that even as we want to achieve each and every one of them, we do so in a way that does not cause trouble. The other one is ecosystems approach. We know that when you are dealing with land, then there are so many related things that you are dealing with. So dealing with land would mean that you are aware that land exists within a socio-ecological system, such that if you make a decision on one thing, then you know that that decision will impact on other things also. So making one decision will impact what we call a general landscape of that place. Then we have community participation as another important principle that we take into account. Is it possible that when we are using these land resources, we ensure that we empower the local community? We empower all stakeholders so that they take role, so that we ensure fairness. We ensure that there is resilient outcome. Do we have policy to support all these things we are talking about? We come up with effective policies. We come up with strong institutional support or incentive mechanisms that we are going to use, so that we are going to achieve that which will work for us. We want to have financial support, technical training, and even clear and permanent land tenure systems for us to be able to use land. And ladies and gentlemen, we can do that a great deal if we practice certain best practices and strategies that exist. So what are some of the best practices that exist when we are talking about sustainable land resource use? Probably we think about agroforestry. Is it possible that we can do the integration? We integrate trees and shrubs and even crops and livestock in one place. This one has a lot of values. For example, you can promote soil fertility. You can prevent erosion. You can even enhance biodiversity if you were to deal with that. What about if we go do conservation agriculture? Is it possible that we can, whenever we are doing our agriculture, we ensure that we minimize soil disturbance? Is it possible? How do we do it? We have reduced tillage, for example. We promote permanent soil cover. What do we do? Whenever you do agriculture and crop residues are normally taken back to be used. We can even do crop rotation, minimizing soil problems that we are having. We can have sustainable livestock management. How do we manage livestock if we want to have sustainable land? Do we graze using certain patterns? Do we promote sustainable feeding, or do we just have free range all the time? What about how do we manage water? Do we have sustainable water management? Do we harvest rainwater? Do we use efficient irrigation system like drip irrigation? Do we do contour plowing if we must? Do we conserve the little water that we have? Do we reduce pollution? Do we improve water efficiency if we must do that? What about afforestation? Do we plant trees, particularly in deforested lands? Or do we restore degraded lands once we have cut down trees, or once we have constructed, or once we have mined? Do we take the land back to its original state? Do we integrate even pest management? If we are to use modern ways or modern pesticides, it might cause trouble. So how do we go about that? Do we bring in biological pest control, crop rotation, chemical control into one approach so that we are able to deal with all these issues? This has a lot of benefits. If we are to use sustainable land management, then it has a lot. We can have very high soil quality if we were to use those methods. We can boost organic matter of the soil. Then we can have greater biodiversity. When they are there are many things that will happen. We call them ecosystem services that we get. We can also improve carbon sequestration because we have quite a lot of things there. Then we can improve food and water security. We can do a great deal of things. We can then enhance livelihoods. Can you imagine what we can do about it? We can reduce environmental degradation by far. We can do a great deal of things because of those benefits. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that today I was just telling us about how we can sustainably use land resources when we are aware of the impacts of climate change. We have just said that climate change impacts on land in a number of ways. Impacts on agricultural practices. It also impacts on water and other resources. It also impacts on our forest and ecosystem in a number of ways. So if we are to adopt sustainable means, then it means we have to have what we call an holistic approach where we integrate economic, social, and environmental considerations. If we do that, then we do great work. And these are actually supposed to help us to address certain unsustainable practices that we use, like deforestation, overgrazing, quite a lot of them. But then this helps when we use certain principles. We balance the various needs that we have. We use the ecosystems approach. We bring community. Then we have strong institutional policies. Then we adopt the best practices that we have been able to see across the globe, like agroforestry, conservation agriculture, sustainable livestock management. We can also manage water through the same approach. We can do afforestation, deforestation, and even the way we manage our pests and diseases can stand to gain quite a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to stop there today. Then I want to remind you to continue to like, to share, and even to comment, and even to subscribe to this channel, because we have a great deal of things that we will want to share with you. Thank you and welcome again.